The word desert usually isn't something you'd say when you want to describe something as being good. When something's empty, you call it deserted, devoid of life, deserted again. When you see something that's vast, endless, swallowing, that has very little to offer, we tend to call it a desert. When we think of a desert, we think of unbearable heat, itchy sand, and bugs hiding under rocks that we wouldn't want to encounter in our worst nightmares. In short, you really don't think of the word fun when you hear deserts. Yet so many games tend to feature deserts as their setting. How is it that developers manage to take a place that honestly has little to offer to anyone and turn it into an interesting locale for us to explore? I'm Pliskin, and that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today. One way to make a desert approachable and fun is to ironically include all of the features that make it such a brutal and harsh place to inhabit. For example, in Breath of the Wild, the painful heat that we mentioned earlier is featured here. Link has to wear certain clothes in order to keep the heat from making him pass out or die while venturing through Hyrule's deserts. Simultaneously, during the night, the harsh cold of a desert is accurately reflected. While traversing through Gerudo territory, Link must also be prepared to wear warm clothing, so you're constantly switching back and forth to keep up with an environment with changing climates. This adds a layer of engagement to the gameplay, as even when you're not fighting or exploring, you need to be actively participating in Link's survival. During traversal, even if you're wearing the appropriate clothing, you still need to be aware of the heat damage that Link will take. Some areas of the Gerudo Desert will provide you with sanctuary from heat, for example the Oasis Hub or the Gerudo City. However, even when you're not in these sanctuaries, you can overcome the heat by traveling faster using one of the sand seals spread across the map. These let you take the arduous task of traversing a desert and make it fun, as you're not necessarily focusing on dying of heat, but you're looking at the vistas, seeing where you want to explore, and you're zipping faster across the sand than you would normally travel in other places in Hyrule. But Breath of the Wild doesn't just stop there. It's not just traversing that becomes fun, but you also stumble across boss fights with these giant Molduga beasts that will spring out of the sand. Couple this with the ordinary enemies that you have sprinkled all over the other parts of Hyrule, and a bunch of hidden treasures and secrets, and all of a sudden, the big empty desert doesn't seem so empty. The last thing Zelda does that I want to talk about is how it uses its desert as a barrier. Think about it, how many games have you played where you all of a sudden reach an invisible wall and it just breaks your sense of immersion? Well, one way that large open world games can create a realistic sort of barrier is by having a desert serve as the end of the world, so to speak. Because realistically, it's going to be very difficult to trek that far into a desert, even with a trusty sand seal. There's even points in the Gerudo Desert where your map doesn't even work and you enter this strange area called the Arbiter's Grounds. A very creative way to incentivize players to explore a little more, but still convey that, hey, this is it. But Breath of the Wild isn't the only game that does this. Far Cry 2, if I had to put it into one word, is a very brutal game.
It's all good. I got your number. I've been watching you.
More often than not, you're a lone wanderer, surviving in the harsh African Sahara. No backup, no real friends, just a whole bunch of guys you barely understand trying to kill you. Shit's brutal, and any sort of peace that you get while roaming the open world is really welcome. So when you finally reach the desert expanses of the map that are coincidentally all in the corners or the edges of the world, it's kinda nice. It's quiet, you get to take in your surroundings, and it's one of those rare times in Far Cry 2 where nobody's dying. For a brief moment, you actually feel like you might be able to escape from the Sahara. But no matter how hard you try, you're trapped here. You'll wake up stranded in the desert, your character giving up on trying to venture out any further, and submitting to their fate of being stuck on this battlefield. Till the moment they die, probably. So travel around the map, see the beautiful oases here and there, but when you come to the deserts, unlike Zelda where they're packed with fun and things for you to explore, they serve as a reminder that you can't get out. That as soon as you turn the game on, you're stuck in the endless cycle of killing that Far Cry 2 offers.
Sun will rise momentarily.
If you know me, you know I'm always going to bring up Metal Gear Solid 5 whenever I have the chance. However, here, I feel like it's really appropriate. Because if there ever was a desert that you could just sit back and relax and enjoy the vistas, it's the large plains of Afghanistan. While it may lack Zelda's depth in terms of survival mechanics and Far Cry 2's intensity in terms of combat, Metal Gear Solid 5 sure knows how to use its setting to its advantage, especially a desert setting. Snake creeps around, he stalks his enemies, he scopes out outposts, he makes plans, and then he uses his space to his advantage upon entering and exiting the enemy stronghold. Like Far Cry 2, those spaces in between stealth, combat, and infiltration are essential for breaking up the game's pacing and for creating a more flowing experience by giving the player a little bit of a break. Imagine, if you will, that these large desert expanses work in the same way as the latter from Metal Gear Solid 3. For an open world stealth game, open, empty, quiet, peaceful spaces are important. The Afghan desert looks so empty, but that immaculate sound design gives it so much life. The backdrop mountains, inspired by the landscapes of Jordan, serve to give each one of Snake's missions a sense of scale, not often felt in stealth games. As you ponder your next move, whether or not to do a side mission or a main op, as you ponder what loadout you're going to need for whichever approach you end up going with, you have a symphony of small bugs, birds, the wind howling, the sparse groups of vegetation rubbing up against each other, reacting to said wind. And to let your mind know that you can be at ease and there's no threat, the sand softly glistens over the dunes, creating one of the most beautiful effects I've ever seen in a game. Say what you want about the Phantom Pain, but this is one hell of an immersive desert. That's it for me, guys. I hope you enjoyed. This has been Pliskin, over and out.